I never saw it coming. Looking back, the signs were there, small, inconsequential things at the time, but hindsight has a way of connecting dots you refuse to see when you're too comfortable. I thought I had everything: a beautiful wife, two wonderful kids, and a career most would envy. But now, all of it feels like an elaborate lie. A carefully crafted facade I didn't realize was crumbling until it was too late. My name is Adam, and until 6 months ago, I was married to Alyssa. She was the love of my life, or at least that's what I believed. We had been together for nearly 10 years, married for 7. I met her when I was 25, fresh out of law school. She was everything I ever wanted: vibrant, confident, and with a smile that made heads turn. People used to comment on how perfect we were together, how lucky we were to have found each other. For years, I believed them. But everything changed 6 months ago when I discovered the truth. A truth that shattered my world and left me questioning everything. It started with something small, innocent even. One evening, after a long day at work, I went into the garage to fix a leaky faucet Alyssa had been asking me about for weeks. I was rummaging through my toolbox when I found it: a neatly folded hotel receipt hidden in the bottom drawer. The hotel was familiar, located only a few miles from her gym. The date on the receipt? Just 3 weeks ago. I stared at it, my mind racing. Alyssa had told me she was meeting with her gym's management team that day, discussing new fitness programs. The thought that she had lied felt absurd at first. Why would she? We were happy, or at least I thought we were. But as I stood there, the seed of doubt planted itself in my mind. And once that seed was planted, it grew. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself it was just a mistake. But the questions kept swirling in my head. Why would she be at a hotel? What was she hiding? The following week, I started noticing things, small things, but enough to set off alarms. Alyssa was glued to her phone more than usual, even taking it with her to the bathroom. There was also the sudden, strange increase in intimacy. For weeks, she had been unusually affectionate, her enthusiasm in the bedroom almost forced. It felt like she was trying to prove something, but instead, it only deepened my suspicions. I tried to shake off the feelings of paranoia, but I couldn't. I needed answers. And that's when I did something I never thought I would. I installed a GPS tracker on her car. I hated myself for it. I felt guilty, ashamed even, but I needed to know the truth. It didn't take long to find out. The following Tuesday, Alyssa told me she was heading to another meeting at the gym. My heart pounded as I watched the GPS app on my phone. And there it was, a glaring truth staring back at me. She wasn't going to the gym. She was headed back to that same hotel. I froze, my blood running cold as I watched the little blinking to settle at the hotel's address. She had lied. My mind raced with questions. Who was she meeting? How long had this been going on? And worst of all, why? I didn't confront her that night. I didn't say a word. Instead, I hired a private investigator. If I was going to confront her, I needed concrete proof, something undeniable, something she couldn't talk her way out of. 2 weeks later, I had everything. Photos, timestamps, text messages, it was all there. Alyssa had been meeting with Greg, one of the trainers from her gym. Their affair had been going on for nearly a year. I couldn't believe it. I sat there, staring at the evidence, feeling like my entire world had been ripped out from under me. The woman I loved, the mother of my children, had betrayed me. The rage was overwhelming. I wanted to confront her, to scream at her, to demand answers. But instead, I waited. I waited for the perfect moment to catch her in the lie, to make her face what she had done. That moment came the next night. She came home from one of her meetings, looking cheerful, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I watched her, waiting for the right time, my heart pounding in my chest. Finally, after we put the kids to bed, I turned to her, my voice cold and steady. "Alyssa," I said, watching her closely, "we need to talk." Her face paled as she sensed something was wrong. "What's going on, Adam?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the photos the investigator had given me. Her eyes widened in shock as she stared at them. There she was, locked in Greg's arms, standing outside the very hotel she'd lied about. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "How long?" I asked, my voice shaking with barely controlled fury. How long have you been lying to me? Alyssa collapsed onto the couch, her face crumpling as tears spilled down her cheeks. Adam, I'm so sorry. I stood over her, my hands clenched into fists. Why? I demanded. Why did you do this? She sobbed, her words coming out in broken fragments. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. I was confused and things between us. Don't, I snapped, cutting her off. Don't you dare put this on me. She stared at me, her tear-streaked face filled with regret. But it wasn't enough. Nothing she said could take away the betrayal, the pain, the anger. I want you to leave, I said coldly. Pack your things and go. Tonight. Her sobs grew louder, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Adam, please, she begged. Don't do this. I love you. I love our family. Please, let me explain. Get out. I repeated, my voice deadly calm. As Alyssa's sobs echoed through the house, I turned and walked away, leaving her there to pack her things. My heart was shattered, but I refused to show it. I had to be strong for myself, for the kids, for everything she had destroyed. But as I stared into the darkness outside, a chilling thought crept into my mind. If Alyssa had been lying to me for a year, what else had she hidden? The next morning, Alyssa was gone. The house felt eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the night before. She had taken her things and left while I was asleep, leaving behind nothing but silence. I stood in the living room, staring at the empty space where her suitcase had been, feeling a hollow ache in my chest. I should have felt relieved, but instead, I felt the crushing weight of everything I had just lost. The kids woke up soon after, oblivious to the storm that had ripped through their lives. I dreaded telling them the truth, but there was no hiding it anymore. Emma, with her bright, inquisitive eyes, sensed something was wrong right away. Jake, still so young, clung to my leg, not fully understanding the tension in the air. Where's Mommy? Emma asked, her small voice full of confusion. I knelt down in front of them, trying to keep my voice steady. Mommy had to go away for a while, sweetheart. But she loves you both very much, and she'll still be around. Just not here, not right now. Emma frowned, her brow furrowing as she tried to process what I was saying. But why? Why did she leave? I swallowed the lump in my throat, hating that I had to do this. Sometimes grown-ups have problems that they can't fix, and they need time apart. Will she come back? Jake asked, his voice trembling. I couldn't lie to them, but the truth was too painful. I don't know, buddy, I said softly. But no matter what, I'll always be here for you. We're going to be okay. Emma's eyes filled with tears, and I pulled both of them into a hug. As they cried against my chest, I felt the weight of my responsibility settle on my shoulders. I had to be strong for them. Even if I felt like I was falling apart inside, they couldn't know. They needed stability, and I was all they had now. The next few weeks were a blur of custody arrangements, lawyer meetings, and awkward exchanges with Alyssa. I couldn't bring myself to speak to her directly. Everything we discussed was through lawyers, a cold and sterile process that felt like the final nail in the coffin of our once-loving marriage. But I wasn't done with the fallout. Not by a long shot. One evening, after tucking the kids into bed, I found myself sitting on the couch, flipping through the evidence the private investigator had given me. There were text messages between Alyssa and Greg, photos of them at the hotel, and receipts for dinners and gifts I hadn't known about. Every piece of evidence felt like a fresh stab in my heart. But then something caught my eye, something I hadn't noticed before. A single text message, buried deep in the chain of messages between Alyssa and Greg, sent from her phone just 2 weeks before I found the hotel receipt. I'm not sure how much longer we can keep this up. Adam's been asking questions. I don't think I can lie to him anymore. The message was addressed to Greg, but what caught my attention was the timestamp. It was sent late at night, a time when I thought Alyssa had been asleep next to me in bed. I stared at the message, my mind racing. She had known. She had known that I was getting suspicious. But instead of stopping, she had continued to lie, continued to sneak around behind my back. I scrolled through the messages again, looking for anything else I might have missed. And then I saw it. Another message, this one from Greg, sent just a few days after the first. He's never going to find out. You know what to do if he gets too close. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. What the hell did that mean? Something dark and dangerous twisted in my gut. The messages between them had always been flirty, even explicit at times, but this was different. There was something sinister in Greg's tone, something that made my skin crawl. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than just an affair. I had caught them, but what if I had only scratched the surface? What if Alyssa and Greg were hiding something even worse? The thought gnawed at me, refusing to let go. I needed answers. I needed to know what they were really up to, and I wasn't going to stop until I found out. A few days later, I took matters into my own hands. I knew where Greg worked. I had avoided confronting him up until now, but the message had changed everything. I wasn't going to sit back and let this man, this stranger who had ruined my marriage, walk away unscathed. It was early evening when I showed up at his gym, just as he was finishing up a training session with a client. I waited in the parking lot, my fists clenched, my heart racing with a mix of anger and adrenaline. When Greg finally came out, I stepped in front of him, blocking his path. He looked up, startled, and for a moment, a flicker of recognition crossed his face. "Adam," he said, his voice cautious. "What are you doing here?" I stared at him, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. "I know everything," I said coldly. "I know about you and Alyssa." Greg's eyes darted around nervously, but he quickly composed himself, shrugging nonchalantly. "Look, man, I'm sorry about what happened, but Alyssa and it just happened. You can't control who you fall for." I took a step closer, my voice low and dangerous. "I don't give a damn about your excuses. I saw the messages. I know what you told her to do if I got too close." "What the hell did you mean by that?" Greg's face paled, his cocky facade slipping for just a moment. "I don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, turning to walk past me. I grabbed his arm, yanking him back. "Don't play dumb with me. What the hell are you hiding?" For a moment, Greg looked like he was going to lash out, but then something changed in his expression. His eyes narrowed, and a slow, smug smile spread across his face. "Let's just say Alyssa wasn't the only one keeping secrets," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. My blood ran cold. "What the hell are you talking about?" I demanded. Greg chuckled, shaking his head. "You really have no idea, do you? You think this was just some fling? Oh man, you're in deeper than you know." Before I could respond, Greg pulled away from me and walked toward his car, leaving me standing there, my mind racing. What the hell was going on? What other secrets was Alyssa hiding? And how far did this go? As I stood in the empty parking lot, watching Greg drive away, I realized that my nightmare was far from over. The affair was just the beginning, and whatever else Alyssa and Greg were involved in, it wasn't over. My marriage had been built on lies, and now, the truth was unraveling faster than I could handle. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to stop until I uncovered everything, no matter how deep this rabbit hole went. The next few days were a blur. After the unsettling conversation with Greg, I couldn't focus on anything else. The words he left me with echoed in my head, twisting around like a snake tightening its grip. "You're in deeper than you know." What did that mean? Was there more to Alyssa's betrayal than just an affair? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something, that Alyssa and Greg had been involved in something far darker than I initially realized. My mind raced through possibilities. Was it blackmail? Financial fraud? Something more dangerous? I had to know the truth. That night, after I put the kids to bed, I sat in the darkened living room, scrolling through old messages on Alyssa's phone. When we separated, she had left behind her old phone in a rush, most likely not realizing the information she had left at my disposal. I hadn't touched it until now, partly because I couldn't bring myself to relive the pain of seeing the evidence of her betrayal. But now, I had no choice. I knew the messages with Greg were already damning, but I needed to see if there was more. My fingers shook as I unlocked the phone, scrolling through months' worth of texts. Most were routine, texts about the kids, her job, mundane day-to-day conversations. But then, buried deep in a chat with one of her friends, I found it, a single message that made my blood run cold. "Alyssa, I can't let him find out. He'll ruin everything. I need this to work. You know how much is at stake." The message was from 2 months before I found the hotel receipt. It wasn't addressed to Greg, but to a name I didn't recognize, Lauren. My hands trembled as I searched for more messages between Alyssa and this mysterious person. There weren't many, but the ones I found were enough to set off alarm bells. Lauren, don't worry, he's too distracted. Keep doing what you're doing, and we'll handle the rest on our end. But if Adam gets too close, we'll have to deal with it. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Who the hell was Lauren? And what exactly were they trying to handle? My stomach twisted as I scrolled through the messages, the knot of dread in my chest tightening with every word. This was no longer just an affair. Alyssa was caught up in something far more dangerous, something that involved more people, more secrets. And I had just scratched the surface. The next morning, I decided to take a different approach. The investigator I'd hired had done his job, but he had only uncovered the affair. He hadn't dug deeper into Alyssa's other activities, and now I needed someone who could. So I called him back, asking for a more thorough investigation into Alyssa's connections, especially this Lauren. By mid-afternoon, I received a call. "You were right," the investigator said, his voice serious. "There's more to this than just her affair. This Lauren person? She's connected to a shell company in town, one that's been under investigation for laundering money." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Money laundering? Are you sure?" "Positive." I looked into the company's records. Lauren's name shows up as an executive, but she's smart. The trail leads to an offshore account. It's almost impossible to track. Your wife may be caught up in something big here, Adam. I rubbed my temples, my mind spinning. And Alyssa? What's her involvement? That's the tricky part, the investigator said. Her name doesn't appear in any official documents, but there's a lot of smoke around her. She's been in communication with Lauren regularly. Text messages, phone calls. It's possible she's been helping cover things up, but without more evidence, it's hard to say for sure. I hung up the phone, my head pounding. The more I dug, the darker this became. Alyssa wasn't just lying about an affair. She was part of a criminal conspiracy. A chill ran down my spine as I realized the depth of her deception. And what terrified me the most was how far she was willing to go to keep her secrets. That night, as I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, I thought about everything that had happened in the past few months. The affair, the lies, the betrayal. It had all seemed so overwhelming. But now, knowing there was something far more sinister beneath it all, I realized just how naive I had been. What if I hadn't found that hotel receipt? What if I hadn't followed the clues? Would Alyssa have continued her double life forever, hiding not just her affair, but her involvement in a criminal network? And how far would she have gone to protect her secret? I couldn't let this go. I had to confront Alyssa, and this time, I wasn't going to stop until I got the answers I deserved. The next morning, I decided to confront her directly. I called Alyssa and asked to meet her in person. We arranged to meet at a local park, a neutral place where the kids wouldn't overhear our conversation. When she arrived, she looked nervous, her eyes darting around as if she knew something was coming. We sat on a bench, the tension between us palpable. I didn't waste any time. "I know about Lauren," I said, my voice cold and steady. "I know what you've been involved in." Alyssa's face went pale, and she stiffened. "What are you talking about? Don't play games with me." I snapped, leaning closer. "I've seen the messages. I know you've been talking to her. I know about the money laundering." She stared at me, wide-eyed, her hands trembling. "Adam, I can explain." "Explain what?" I demanded. "Explain how you've been lying to me for months? How you've been hiding your involvement in a criminal operation. You weren't just having an affair, Alyssa. You've been part of something much bigger. And I want to know exactly what you've been doing." Her lower lip quivered as tears welled up in her eyes. For a moment, I thought she was going to deny everything. But then she broke down, sobbing. "I didn't have a choice," she whispered. "I got in over my head. Lauren, she's dangerous, Adam. She pulled me into this, and I couldn't get out." "Dangerous how?" I asked, my heart pounding. "What has she done?" Alyssa wiped her eyes, her voice shaking. "At first, it was just small things. She needed me to help move money through the gym, just a few accounts here and there. But then it got bigger. She told me if I didn't help her, she'd destroy my life. She knew things about me, about us. She had dirt on Greg, too. She was blackmailing me." I stared at her, my anger boiling over. So, you sold me out? You betrayed our family to save yourself. I didn't mean to, she sobbed. I thought I could control it, but it spiraled out of control. And now I don't know how to fix it. I stood up, pacing in front of her, my mind racing. This was worse than I had imagined. Alyssa had dragged our entire family into something dangerous, something that could have serious consequences. You need to go to the police, I said finally. You need to tell them everything. Alyssa shook her head frantically. No, you don't understand. If I go to the police, Lauren will come after me. She'll come after the kids. She's not just a businesswoman, Adam. She has connections, dangerous ones. My blood ran cold. I had thought this was just a case of financial fraud, but now it was clear that the people Alyssa had gotten involved with were far more dangerous than I had realized. I don't care how dangerous she is, I said, my voice hard. You've put us all at risk. You need to do the right thing. Alyssa looked up at me, her eyes filled with fear. I can't, she whispered. I'm scared, Adam. I don't know what to do. I stared at her, the weight of everything crashing down on me. I had no idea how to get out of this, but one thing was clear. We were in deep, and we weren't alone. If we didn't act fast, this situation could spiral out of control. As Alyssa sat there, trembling in fear, I realized that this wasn't just about her anymore. This was about our family. And whatever Lauren's plans were, they weren't going to stop with Alyssa. I had to protect my kids. I had to protect myself. And if Alyssa wasn't willing to go to the police, I would. But first, I needed to find out just how far this conspiracy went and how many more lives were at risk. Alyssa's confession left me reeling. The weight of her words sank deep into my chest, suffocating me. This wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It wasn't even about the affair. It was about something far more sinister, a dangerous game that Alyssa had become entangled in, and now, by extension, so had I. As I paced in front of her on that park bench, my mind raced. I couldn't think clearly. Everything Alyssa had said about Lauren, about the money laundering, and the threat to our family, it was too much to process. But one thing stood out above all the noise in my head. I had to protect my children. We need to go to the police, I said again. But this time, the words felt heavier, laced with urgency. Alyssa shook her head, tears streaming down her face. You don't understand, Adam. If I go to the police, Lauren will find out. She'll destroy me. She'll come after you, the kids, everyone. Then what's the alternative? I demanded. We just sit back and let her control us? Let her keep you in this nightmare forever. I don't know, she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I don't know what to do. I'm scared, Adam. I thought I could fix it, but it's too big. It's too dangerous. I stood there, watching the woman I had once loved crumble before me. And for the first time, I saw just how deeply she had been dragged into this. Her affair with Greg wasn't the source of her downfall. It was only a symptom of something far darker. She had been manipulated, coerced, and now trapped by a criminal mastermind. But that didn't change the fact that she had betrayed me, betrayed our family. I couldn't forgive her for that. But I also couldn't just walk away. Not with our children's lives at stake. Not with the shadow of Lauren lurking over everything. We'll figure something out, I said, my voice low. But you need to be honest with me, Alyssa. I need to know everything. She looked up at me, her eyes swollen and red from crying. I'll tell you, she whispered. But you have to promise you'll help me. I didn't answer. I wasn't sure I could make that promise. But I nodded, signaling for her to continue. As we sat on the park bench, Alyssa began to unravel the full extent of the nightmare she had been living. It all started over a year ago when Lauren approached her at the gym. Lauren had just become a new client, but unlike most of the women Alyssa trained, she exuded power, confidence that bordered on intimidation. She quickly took a liking to Alyssa, requesting her as a personal trainer for one-on-one sessions. At first, it seemed innocent enough, but then things started to shift. Lauren began asking Alyssa to do small favors for her, things that seemed harmless at first, making deposits at the bank, setting up a few accounts in the gym's name. Alyssa didn't think much of it. After all, Lauren paid well, and the gym trusted her. But over time, those small favors grew into something much more dangerous. Lauren revealed that she had been using the gym's accounts to launder money for a series of businesses she controlled. businesses that were little more than fronts for illegal activities. By the time Alyssa realized what was happening, it was too late. Lauren had leverage, evidence that could destroy her career, her marriage, and her life. And then there was Greg. He was the gym star trainer, the guy everyone looked up to. Lauren saw an opportunity and pushed Greg and Alyssa together, knowing that if Alyssa fell into an affair, it would only make it easier to control her. Greg became part of the web Lauren had spun, an accomplice who helped keep Alyssa under Lauren's thumb. It was all part of Lauren's plan. Keep Alyssa trapped in the affair, use her guilt and shame to control her, and ensure she had no way out. But when I started asking questions, it threatened to unravel everything. That's when the real threats began. Lauren told me that if you got too close, if you started digging, she'd make sure you disappeared, Alyssa whispered, her voice trembling. She wasn't just talking about divorce or ruining your career. She meant something worse. I felt a chill run down my spine. Why didn't you come to me sooner? I asked, my voice tight with anger and disbelief. We could have stopped this before it went this far. I was scared, Alyssa admitted, tears filling her eyes again. I didn't know what to do. I was afraid of losing everything, of losing you. And then I just kept sinking deeper and deeper. Her words hung in the air, the weight of her choices pressing down on both of us. I couldn't comprehend how she had allowed herself to become so entangled in this mess, how she had let fear and guilt destroy everything we had built. But what was done was done. Now, we had to figure out how to escape this nightmare. We need to go to the police, I said again, more determined this time. This is too big for us to handle alone. Alyssa shook her head, her face pale. If we do that, Lauren will know. She'll come after us before we can get protection. She's powerful, Adam. She has people in law enforcement, in the courts, everywhere. We can't trust anyone. Her words filled me with dread. This wasn't just a matter of going to the authorities. It was a matter of survival. We couldn't trust anyone. And the more Alyssa talked, the more I realized just how deep Lauren's influence ran. That night, after leaving Alyssa, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, haunted by everything I had learned. Lauren wasn't just a criminal. She was dangerous, ruthless, and connected. If she knew that I was getting too close, she wouldn't hesitate to take drastic measures. I couldn't let that happen. I had to protect my family. But how? The answer came to me in a moment of clarity. I needed to gather evidence, real, undeniable evidence of Lauren's crimes. Something so damning that she couldn't wiggle out of it, no matter how powerful her connections were. And I needed to do it in secret, without her knowing. The only problem? I had no idea where to start, so I called the one person I knew could help, the private investigator. The next morning, I met with him in a small diner just outside of town. He sat across from me, his face grim as I laid out everything I had learned about Alyssa, Lauren, and the money laundering scheme. You've stumbled into something dangerous, Adam, he said, sipping his coffee. This woman, Lauren, she's not just some small-time crook. She's got her hands in a lot of pockets. And if what you're saying is true, she won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatens her operation. I know, I replied, my voice low. That's why I need your help. I need more evidence, something that ties her directly to the crimes. I need to bring her down. The investigator nodded, his expression serious. I can help you, but it's going to be risky. If she finds out we're investigating her, she'll come after you. You need to be prepared for that. I don't care about the risks, I said, my jaw clenched. I need to stop her. I need to protect my kids. He studied me for a moment before nodding. All right, I'll dig deeper. But be careful, Adam. This is dangerous territory. Once we start down this road, there's no turning back. As I left the diner, I felt the weight of the decision I had just made settle over me. I was about to dive into a world of darkness and danger, a world I had no experience with. But I had no choice. I had to uncover the truth. For my kids, for myself, and for whatever was left of the life I had thought I knew. But deep down, I knew that once I pulled the thread of Lauren's web, everything would unravel, and there was no telling what horrors I might find. I left the diner with a heavy heart and a knot in my stomach. The plan was in motion, but the reality of what I was doing, what I was about to face, was settling over me like a suffocating blanket. I had no idea how deep this went, how far Lauren's influence spread, or what she would do to protect herself. But there was no turning back. I had made my choice. The investigator, Paul, had promised to dig deeper into Lauren's connections and gather the evidence we needed. He was good at his job, but even he had been cautious, warning me repeatedly that Lauren was dangerous. More dangerous than I had initially realized. I spent the next few days on edge, constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for something, anything, to happen. My paranoia grew with each passing hour, fueled by the knowledge that Lauren had people everywhere. Was she watching me? Did she already know I was trying to take her down? Alyssa had gone into hiding, staying at a friend's house outside of town. She was terrified, but I had made her promise not to contact anyone. I couldn't risk her tipping off Lauren by accident, not when we were this close to exposing the truth. I had to be the one to handle this. For the sake of my children, I had to be smarter than her. A week later, Paul called me. "I found something," he said, his voice grim. "It's big, Adam, but I need to show you in person." We arranged to meet at a safe location, a rundown motel on the outskirts of town, far enough from prying eyes. When I arrived, Paul was waiting for me in a dimly lit room, his laptop open on the small table. "What do you have?" I asked, my heart racing as I sat down across from him. Paul turned the laptop toward me, pulling up a series of documents. "These are financial records I managed to track down. They link Lauren directly to several offshore accounts that have been flagged for suspicious activity. We're talking millions of dollars being funneled through shell companies, all tied back to her." I leaned in closer, scanning the documents. It was all there: wire transfers, account numbers, names of fake companies. It was the proof we needed, the evidence that could take Lauren down. But there was something else, something that made my blood run cold. Among the names listed in the transactions, I saw one that stood out like a beacon: Alyssa Davis. My hands shook as I pointed at her name. "Why is she listed here?" Paul frowned. "That's the thing. Lauren has been using Alyssa's name and credentials to set up some of these accounts. Your wife was more involved than she realized. Lauren made it look like Alyssa was part of the operation from the beginning. If this comes out, Alyssa could be implicated in the whole scheme." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I had known Alyssa was in deep, but this was worse than I had imagined. Lauren had set her up, used her to cover her tracks. And if this information got out without context, Alyssa would go down with her. My mind raced as I tried to process the implications. We had the evidence to take down Lauren, but it came at a cost. If we exposed this, Alyssa would be dragged down too. She might be able to claim she was coerced, but with her name all over these accounts, it would be an uphill battle. And Lauren? She would make sure Alyssa took the fall. "We need more," I said, my voice thick with frustration. "This isn't enough. If we hand this over now, Alyssa will be destroyed." Paul nodded. "I'm working on it. There's one more thing I'm trying to track down: a ledger that Lauren keeps hidden. It's a detailed record of every transaction, every person involved. If we get our hands on that, it could clear Alyssa and put Lauren behind bars for good." "How do we find it?" I asked, my stomach churning. Paul hesitated. "I have a contact who used to work for Lauren. He might know where the ledger is, but he's not going to talk unless we offer him protection." I nodded, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "Do whatever it takes. We need that ledger." Paul closed the laptop and stood up. "I'll reach out to him. But Adam, be careful. Lauren isn't stupid. She's going to know something's up soon, if she doesn't already. You're playing with fire." "I know," I said quietly, "but I don't have a choice." That night, I couldn't sleep. The weight of the information Paul had uncovered gnawed at me, making it impossible to think about anything else. Alyssa's name being tied to the money laundering operation meant that she was in more danger than ever. If Lauren got wind of our investigation, she could easily pin everything on Alyssa, wiping her hands clean. I had to act fast, but every move I made felt like walking through a minefield. One wrong step, and everything could explode. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about my kids. They had no idea what was going on. I had done my best to shield them from the chaos that had overtaken my life. But how long could I keep this up? How long could I pretend that everything was normal? A knock at the door startled me, and my heart leapt into my throat. It was late, too late for visitors. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the side of the bed and crept toward the front door. Another knock. Adam. A familiar voice called out from the other side. I hesitated for a moment before opening the door. It was Alyssa. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Before I could say anything, she pushed past me, walking into the living room. Alyssa, what the hell are you doing here? I asked, shutting the door behind her. I had to see you, she said, her voice trembling. Something's wrong. I think Lauren knows. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? I've been hiding out at Melissa's house like you told me to, but yesterday I saw a car parked outside for hours. It wasn't Melissa's neighbors. And then today, someone left a note on my windshield. She pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket and handed it to me. I unfolded it, my heart pounding. You can't hide forever. The words were written in bold, blocky letters, and the sight of them sent a shiver down my spine. You need to go back to Melissa's, I said, trying to stay calm. You're not safe here. I can't. Alyssa's voice cracked with panic. What if they're following me? What if they know where I've been? Adam, I don't know what to do. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to think. We need to get you somewhere safe. I'll call Paul. He can help, but you can't stay here. It's too dangerous. Alyssa's eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head. This is all my fault, she whispered. I should have come to you sooner. I should have. It's too late for that. I interrupted, my voice harsher than I intended. We can't change what's already happened. All we can do now is figure out how to fix it. Alyssa nodded, wiping her eyes. What do we do? I was about to respond when my phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at the screen. It was Paul. I'll handle this, I said, picking up the phone. We'll get through it. As I stepped outside to take Paul's call, a sense of dread settled over me. We were running out of time. Lauren was closing in, and the noose around our necks was tightening. The note, the surveillance, it was all a warning. A message from Lauren that she was one step ahead of us. But I wasn't going to let her win. The game was far from over, and I was willing to risk everything to bring her down. But as I listened to Paul's voice on the other end of the line, the gravity of the situation became clear. There were no more safe moves. I stepped outside, phone pressed to my ear, trying to keep my voice steady as I spoke to Paul. She's been followed, Paul. There was a car outside her friend's house for hours, and she found a note. We're being watched. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I was afraid of this, Paul said, his voice grim. Lauren's making her move. She's trying to intimidate you. We're running out of time, Adam. We need to hit her before she hits us. My heart pounded in my chest as I glanced back toward the house, where Alyssa sat on the couch, her face buried in her hands. I had to keep her safe, but I also had to protect my kids and myself. Lauren was closing in, and the walls were starting to feel like they were closing in too. Tell me you found something, I said, my voice tight with urgency. I've got a lead on the ledger, Paul replied. My contact said Lauren keeps it hidden in a safe at one of her properties outside of town. It's her most guarded secret. If we can get our hands on it, it's enough to bring her entire operation down. It has everything: names, dates, transactions. But there's a problem. I knew what he was going to say before the words left his mouth. The safe is heavily guarded. Security cameras, armed guards, the works. We can't just waltz in and take it. I clenched my jaw, frustration boiling beneath the surface. We were so close, but every move felt like it was putting us in more danger. Lauren had eyes everywhere, and now she knew we were getting too close. What's the plan then? I asked, already dreading the answer. We have to act fast, but carefully. I can arrange for a distraction, something to pull her guards away from the safe for a window of time. But it's risky. We'll only have one chance, and if we're caught, well, let's just say Lauren won't show mercy. I ran a hand through my hair, the weight of the situation crashing down on me. I had come this far, and I couldn't turn back now. This was our only shot at getting the evidence we needed to bring Lauren down and protect Alyssa from being framed for the whole operation. Let's do it, I said, my voice steely with determination. When do we move? Tomorrow night, Paul replied. I'll set everything up. Be ready. That night, I barely slept. Every creak, every gust of wind outside the house made me jump, convinced that Lauren had finally sent someone to finish what she'd started. My mind raced with every possible outcome, every potential scenario where this all went wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a trap, but what choice did I have? I kept thinking about Emma and Jake, fast asleep in their rooms, blissfully unaware of the storm that was brewing around them. They didn't deserve this. I had promised to protect them, and now I was the one dragging them into danger. I couldn't let this go any further. The next morning, I sat Alyssa down at the kitchen table, her eyes still swollen from a night of restless sleep. I needed her to understand the gravity of what was about to happen. "Listen to me, Alyssa," I said, my voice low but firm. "Tonight, we're going after the ledger. Paul has a plan, but it's dangerous. I need you to stay here with the kids. Don't leave the house. Don't answer the door. Just keep them safe." Her eyes widened with fear. "What if something happens to you, Adam? What if—" "Nothing's going to happen to me," I interrupted, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. "But if anything does, Paul will come for you. He'll protect you and the kids. We'll make sure Lauren never touches you." Alyssa's lips trembled, and she looked down, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I'm so sorry, Adam," she whispered, her voice breaking. "For everything. For getting you into this. I never meant for it to go this far." I wanted to believe her. Part of me still wanted to hold on to the idea that the woman I had loved wasn't a monster, that she had been manipulated, coerced, trapped. But the reality was that she had lied to me for months. She had betrayed me, and now we were both paying the price. "We don't have time for regrets," I said, my voice hard. "We need to focus on what comes next." Alyssa nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I'll do whatever it takes to keep them safe." "Good," I replied, my heart heavy with the weight of everything that was about to unfold. "We'll end this. I promise." As night fell, I met Paul at a secluded location outside of town, not far from Lauren's property. The plan was simple but dangerous. Paul would create a distraction, pulling the guards away from the safe for just long enough for me to slip inside, grab the ledger, and get out. It sounded simple enough, but I knew that one wrong move could get us both killed. Paul handed me a small earpiece, his face serious as he outlined the plan one final time. "Once I set off the distraction, you'll have about 5 minutes to get in and out. I'll be monitoring the security feed, so I'll guide you through. Just stay calm, and whatever you do, don't panic." I nodded, trying to keep my nerves in check. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Paul asked, eyeing me carefully. I wasn't sure, but I had no choice. "Let's do this," I said, steeling myself for what was to come. Paul gave me a nod and slipped into the shadows, leaving me alone in the cold night air. My heart raced as I waited for the signal, every nerve in my body on edge. The minutes stretched out like hours, the silence around me thick and oppressive. And then, suddenly, an explosion rocked the night, lighting up the sky in a fiery blaze. It was time. I moved quickly, my footsteps silent as I approached the side of the house. Paul's voice crackled in my ear. "The guards are heading toward the explosion. You've got 5 minutes, Adam. Go!" I slipped through the side entrance, my pulse thundering in my ears as I navigated the dimly lit corridors of Lauren's mansion. Paul guided me with precise directions, leading me deeper into the house, toward the safe hidden in her private office. "Left at the end of the hall," Paul instructed, his voice calm but urgent. "You're almost there." I rounded the corner and came face to face with a large, ornate door. It was the kind of door you'd expect to see guarding something valuable, thick, reinforced, and intimidating. My hands shook as I reached for the keypad beside it, praying that Paul's contact had given us the right code. 2391, Paul's voice said in my ear. I punched in the numbers, holding my breath. For a moment, nothing happened, and then, with a soft click, the door swung open. Inside, I found the safe, a massive steel box built into the wall. My heart pounded as I approached it, my fingers trembling as I punched in the second code Paul had given me. The safe beeped, and I heard the locks disengage. This was it. I pulled the door open and froze. Inside, stacked neatly on top of the ledger, was something I hadn't expected. Photographs, dozens of them. Photographs of me, Alyssa, my children. Pictures of us at home, at the park, at school functions. Every aspect of my life laid out in black and white, as if Lauren had been watching me for years. My blood ran cold. Adam, you need to move. Paul's voice crackled in my ear. You're running out of time. But I couldn't move. My hands shook as I stared at the photos, a sickening realization settling over me. Lauren hadn't just been manipulating Alyssa. She had been watching me. For years. I grabbed the ledger, shoving the photos into my bag, my mind spinning. This wasn't just about Alyssa anymore. This was about me. About my family. Lauren had been planning this for a long time. And now I had walked straight into her trap. My hands trembled as I shoved the photos into my bag, the weight of what I had just discovered pressing down on me like a vice. Lauren hadn't just been watching Alyssa. She had been watching me, our kids, our entire lives. For how long? I didn't know, but the thought of her shadow looming over us all these years made my skin crawl. Adam, you need to get out of there. Now, Paul's voice crackled urgently through the earpiece, but I could barely focus on his words. My mind raced, a whirlwind of fear, confusion, and anger. Lauren had been playing a far more dangerous game than I'd realized. I had walked into her trap. I grabbed the ledger, my fingers shaking as I stuffed it into the bag alongside the photos. I had come this far. There was no turning back now. Adam. Paul's voice grew sharper, yanking me out of my daze. The guards are coming back. You've got 30 seconds tops. Get out. I spun on my heels, my heart hammering in my chest as I sprinted back down the hallway. Every shadow felt like a threat. Every creak of the floorboard sent a jolt of panic through me. I could hear the distant sound of footsteps, heavy, hurried. The guards. They were coming back. I reached the side entrance, flinging the door open just as I heard voices behind me. They were getting closer. Move, Adam, Paul urged. I slipped through the door and bolted across the lawn, ducking behind the bushes as the sound of guards shouting echoed through the night. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I kept moving, desperate to get as far away from Lauren's property as possible. When I finally reached the meeting spot where Paul had parked, I collapsed into the passenger seat, gasping for breath. Paul gave me a quick once-over, his eyes narrowing as he saw the fear etched on my face. You've got the ledger? He asked, already pulling out of the lot. Yeah, I panted, clutching the bag to my chest. But there's more. Lauren, she's been watching me. Watching us. For years. Paul's expression darkened, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the steering wheel. What do you mean? I pulled out the photos and handed them to him. Paul's face paled as he flipped through them. Pictures of me, Alyssa, and the kids, taken from a distance, some from close-up. It was as if Lauren had cataloged every moment of my life, waiting for the perfect time to strike. She's been planning this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't just manipulate Alyssa. She's been pulling the strings all along. This was never about the affair. This was about control, about power. Paul glanced at me, his expression grim. We need to move fast. If she knows you've got the ledger, she'll come after you. After all of you. When I got home that night, I didn't waste any time. Alyssa was still awake, pacing nervously in the living room when I walked through the door. The moment she saw me, her eyes widened with relief. Did you get it? She asked, her voice trembling. I nodded, dropping the bag on the table. I got it, but it's worse than we thought, Alyssa. Lauren's been watching us. She's been planning this for a long time. Alyssa's face went pale, her hands covering her mouth in shock. What do you mean? How long? I pulled out the photos, spreading them across the table. Alyssa's eyes darted over the images, her expression shifting from disbelief to horror. Pictures of us at the park, at the grocery store, at home, places where we thought we were safe. All this time, Lauren had been lurking in the shadows, documenting our every move. Oh my God, Alyssa whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. This is my fault. I brought her into our lives. I shook my head, trying to keep my own emotions in check. This isn't just about you anymore. Lauren has been manipulating both of us from the start. She's dangerous, Alyssa. And now, she knows I have the ledger. She's going to come after us. Alyssa sank into the chair, burying her face in her hands. What are we going to do? How do we stop her? We go to the police. I said firmly, pulling the ledger out of the bag. We have enough evidence now to take her down, but we have to move fast before she realizes what we've done. Alyssa looked up at me, her eyes filled with fear. And what if she comes after us before we get the chance? What if she tries to hurt the kids? I clenched my fists, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I couldn't let anything happen to Emma and Jake. I had already failed them by letting this situation spiral out of control, and now their lives were in danger because of Lauren's twisted games. We won't let that happen, I said, my voice steely with resolve. I'll do whatever it takes to keep them safe. The next morning, I contacted Paul and arranged to meet him at the police station. We had the evidence we needed. The ledger was ironclad proof of Lauren's criminal empire. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Lauren was always one step ahead of us. She had too many connections, too many ways to manipulate the system. As we drove to the station, Alyssa sat beside me, silent and tense. She hadn't said much since the night before, and I could feel the weight of her guilt hanging in the air between us. Part of me wanted to scream at her for getting us into this mess, for betraying me and letting Lauren into our lives. But I couldn't focus on that now. We had to survive first. We arrived at the station, the sun barely up as we walked inside with Paul. The investigator led us through the process, handing over the ledger and the photos to the detectives. As they reviewed the evidence, I felt a flicker of hope. This was it. We were finally going to bring Lauren down. But that hope was short-lived. As we sat in the cold, sterile office, the door swung open and a man in a suit entered. His presence sent a chill down my spine. He had the air of someone who wasn't there to help. "I'm Detective Harris," he said, his voice deep and authoritative. "I'll be handling this case from here." Paul frowned, exchanging a glance with me. "Detective Harris? I don't remember you being assigned to this case." Harris gave him a cold smile. Things change. Something about him felt wrong. There was a confidence in the way he moved, in the way he dismissed Paul's concerns. And then the pieces started to fall into place. Lauren had people everywhere, people in law enforcement, people in the courts. Was this one of them? I stood up, my heart racing. "I don't trust this," I whispered to Paul. "Something's off about him." Paul's eyes narrowed as he watched the detective closely. "I'm getting the same feeling. We need to be careful." Before I could say anything else, Detective Harris closed the file, looking directly at me. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention, Mr. Davis. We'll take it from here." But I wasn't buying it. Not for a second. "I want to know what happens next," I said, my voice firm. "What are you going to do with the evidence? When will you arrest Lauren?" Harris smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Leave that to us. We'll be in touch." As we walked out of the station, the dread in my stomach deepened. I had trusted the wrong person. Detective Harris wasn't here to help us. He was part of Lauren's network. Paul saw it too, his face grim as we reached the car. "We just handed everything over to her," I whispered, fear clawing at my chest. Paul nodded, his jaw tight. "We need to disappear. Now." Alyssa's face went pale. "What about the kids?" "We'll protect them," I said, determination taking over. "Lauren's powerful, but she won't touch our family. Not if we disappear before she can strike." In a whirlwind, we packed what we could and drove out of town. The kids slept in the back seat, unaware that their entire world had changed. We fled, leaving behind the life we once knew, the house, the memories, and the wreckage of Alyssa's choices. Lauren was out there, still pulling strings, but she wouldn't find us. Not this time. As the road stretched out before us, I realized survival wasn't about fighting the monster. Sometimes it was about escaping it. And that's exactly what we did.